what should church be? I'm saying that, you know, when we're talking about church, I'm talking about meetings right now. Obviously, the church is not a meeting. But I believe that the meeting, when we're talking about should it be seeker sensitive, how much should God, you know, I forget how you put it, but, you know, how much should God control? And of course, the answer to that we all know is everything. But
Sure.
what does it look like?
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, if I think that our services in this apostolic age are supposed to be Holy Spirit terrorist training centers where people come to church and then they become the church.
Come on.
And the goal of Sunday morning is that we would train and equip and deploy people into the uttermost parts of the earth. And when I say terrorists, I'm talking about not terrorizing people. I'm talking about terrorizing powers of darkness.
That's right.
You know, Jesus said that he came to destroy the works of the devil. That Sunday mornings is not necessarily the place where believers come. I mean, where unbelievers come, because I think we're moving from people, you know, unbelievers coming to church to believers moving into every dimension of life. In other words, it's not so much about people like coming to the pool of Bethesda to get healed. It's more like Ezekiel's river, where the river's flowing out into all of society. It's trickling underneath the sanctuary door, and wherever the river goes, there's life.
Come on.
And so I'm saying that we're moving from this model, if you will. I'm using these two metaphors to kind of give us a picture. Like in the pool of Bethesda, everybody had to go to the pool to get healed. And like that's kind of the church model we have right now. It's like we're all talking about like what should we do in church, because you know we don't want to offend the unbelievers and we want to equip the believers. And I'm like, well, if people instead of come to church, if they become the church, then unbelievers don't have to come to the church to get healed. They don't have to come to church to get saved. They don't have to come to church to get counseled, because the saints are getting equipped to do the work of service. And they're like flowing out from under the sanctuary door, so to speak.
Come on.
They're flowing into the nations. And the whole purpose of 2 hours on Sunday morning doesn't become like, let's try to change the world in 2 hours on Sunday morning. It's like, well, how's that working out for us?
Yeah.
Because most of the people who really need transformed don't come to our church. Don't matter what we do. You can have a rock band in your church, and really, most of the people who need to be touched aren't going to come to church. But they are in the marketplace, they are in the workplace, they are in the educational. I mean, those are the people that need touched are not going to come to the four walls of the city. I mean, four walls of your church. Here's a statistic that it may shock you, James, and it may be some of our listeners. I only know American statistics. So the cities that have the greatest Christian church-going population have the worst social statistics in our city, in our nation. Okay, what does that tell you? It says to me that, okay, so let me make sure that our listeners understand what I just said. The more people who come to church in an American city, the worse off, the higher the crime rate, the worse the economic statistics are of our city, the worse the divorce rate is. So just being really clear, like the more people that gather on Sunday morning in church, in a Christian church, the worse off that city is, with the exception of 5 or 6 cities in our nation. What does that tell you? That gathering people for 2 hours on Sunday morning does not change culture.
Wow.
And I think if our pastors and leaders could hear that part, it's like, listen, what we're doing isn't working.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't transform people.
Sure.
So I'm not saying like church isn't doing a good job. I'm not saying some of the things that could mean. I'm saying if we're trying to bring heaven to earth, and if we're saying like one of our goals is to see the kingdom touch every realm of society, I'm saying that's not getting done in 2 hours on Sunday morning. That's what I'm saying.
Good.
So, you know, your question, I understand that this is a long answer.
It's good.
It's a long answer because I want people to understand that my answer is coming from the perspective of, I believe the church is supposed to transform culture.
Yeah.
And, and I think that if we're trying to transform culture, and not just transform, in other words, Jesus said, make disciples of all nations. So, of course, we're supposed to make disciples in nations, but we're supposed to make disciples of nations. Jesus said, I will build my church. The gates of hell won't prevail against it. He said, you extend the kingdom. Like 147 times. You heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons, say the kingdom's come near you. So our job is to extend the kingdom. His job is to build the church.
Very good.
In my opinion, we have tried to swap roles. We're like, we'll build the church.
Sure.
We advertise the church, try to get people to come to church. We make the church the answer for everything. We're like, okay, we build the church, and we're like, who's extending the kingdom? And I think that's an issue. It's like, okay, all of the church is in the kingdom, but not all the kingdom is in the church.
Wow.